Cohen, before we went to break, you were talking about the press conference. And let's just be clear, it was not a press conference. It was a statement that was with the press as the audience, because at a press conference you take questions, that Donald Trump did on Friday.
Yeah, filled with a whole bunch of people that work in the building and so on. But as I was watching it, I just decided I had to put out something onto my Twitter account. I wrote, Trump's press conference was nothing shy of a bat-S crazy avalanche of broken brain word manure. Because that's really what it was. It was a rambling series of nonsense. But here's something that's interesting that no one's talking about. We're going to break it right here on the weekend. He's not even allowed to do that press conference in Trump Tower.
Why not?
Because he doesn't own the public space. If you look outside the door, it says open to the public. He gave away that space years ago, 40-plus years ago, in order to build the residential portion. That's how he obtained the FAR, the air rights, in order to go as high as he did for that property. He does not own it. Therefore, you need a permit. He was warned of this in 2016 during the campaign. But does Donald Trump care about the law? No. The same way he put out the clock on Fifth Avenue without permits. I mean, he just does things. The law doesn't apply to him the way it applies to the rest of us.
I think that's an important point, and it's a part of the psychology of Trump that I've always been fascinated by. And in my encounters with him earlier on in 13 or whatever, and then just watching him subsequently, it is very clear he's a man who believes I will do it unless you stop me. And he doesn't believe you can stop him. And there is some truth to that, Michael. I mean, you look at how our systems, our judicial system, our political systems, our media have just capitulated to his brand, his level of pugnacious, offensive behavior, treating it as entertainment, treating it as politically prescient in terms of how Republicans look at it. What is it about him that allows him to your point, do the thing he's not allowed by law or by principle to do, and yet everything around him just kind of goes, okay.
Except, I will note, we're having this conversation in the context of the fact that he has been convicted of 34 felony counts.
I got that,
but
we are,
and $500 million in the New York Attorney General case, and another $100 million.
But folks,
just
we
about
are
to EG.
we are 8 years into this, so we're at now we're at that point. But look at all the terrain that has been disrupted and burned to the ground before we got to that point. And that's what I'm talking. This accountability now is important, but along the way it wasn't there. So my question is, what was it about him that made people feel, I mean, the lawyers that didn't get paid, the people, and yet they come back, the banks who, had defaults, and yet they would give him a loan the next time. What is it?
Yeah, it's unexplainable. I mean, I truly don't understand it either. Now, is Donald Trump entertaining? Absolutely. I mean, first of all, the Oompa Loompa-ish sort of look that goes on. I mean, how many people have made fun of the orange tan or the cotton candy hair and so on for years? He actually embraces the attacks. He believes anything negative said about him is a positive. I mean, that's a narcissistic sociopath by design. What he does is he makes everything about him. And for whatever the reason, people just go along. He brings out the worst in people
and they seem to like it.
They not only do they like it, they embrace it and they run with it.
And I want to know, not like it. He about to go to jail, maybe. Okay,
well, let's talk about that, because two questions for you. One, which is, having gone through this pre-sentencing hearing, I want to hear from you sort of what that experience is like and how you think he's going to do it. I've also heard you say you don't think he should go to prison, and I want to understand more about why.
Okay, so the first part, yes, I did go through that process, the pre-sentencing report, so thanks for bringing up a bad memory. Sure. It's a horrible process. You sit down with an individual and you basically have to open up your entire life to them, whether it's financial, whether it's medical. They need to know everything. And it is based upon that document that gets submitted to the judge for review, and the judge uses that in determining the sentence. Now, here, we see, once again, to Mike's point, Donald is bombastic. They want to call me the bombastic one. They thought I was going to come onto the stand with a baseball bat or a 9-iron and start swinging it. Donald Trump is the only one every single day who went out there and attacked everybody, right? And again, he had a whole slew of members of Congress sitting behind him doing the same thing. That's going to determine the sentence, including the violations of the gag order, which I believe he did again yesterday. I still think the gag order is in place, and his behavior, his 10-minute rambling about me, he's violating the gag order. Do I think that he's going to be convicted? Absolutely. 100%. Do I think that Judge Merchan is going to sentence him to prison or to jail? The answer is no.
Right, but do you think you've also said that you don't think he should be sentenced to jail? And
I'm afraid of him going to jail.
Why?
And not for him, not for his safety. That's on him. He's got Secret Service protection. I'm more concerned for you and for all of us and our families and for the American people, because this clown had 4 years of being debriefed on national security issues. On top of that, if he becomes the Republican nominee, he gets debriefed again starting now. Think about this. America, think about this for a second. You have now a Republican leading candidate who is a felon who's going to be debriefed on national security issues, knowing how loose-lipped he is, how he's willing to give away America's secrets to Vladimir Putin or to anybody for money or just simply for bragging rights. He did it with the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago. He sat there in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin talking about national security issues, but nobody else was around except for Vladimir Putin's translator. I mean, these are not normal things. You don't allow somebody like Donald Trump to be declassified, especially now as a felon. So my concern is, in a prison situation, he's willing to give away these secrets, as I always say, for a bag of tuna or a book of stamps, and he will do it because he doesn't care. If America turns against him, he'd rather see America burned to the ground. And that's who Donald Trump is, plain and simple.
That part I believe. That I believe. Although I think his behind needs to go to jail. But
well, you know what, Michael Cohen, will you stay for a little longer?
For you, absolutely.
We appreciate you. Michael Cohen is going to be here, and we will be right back. You're watching The Weekend. We're back with Michael Cohen. Thank you for sticking around,
So,
Mr. Chairman.
Not like I had a choice.
We did ask for permission.
Kind of locked him into the chair. A couple of things I want to touch on, but one of them I want to finish up on the prison portion here. There is this. See, here's where I come from. I get the whole former president thing. All right, okay. And I'm looking at all the former presidents before Trump, and none of them did any of this. None of them wound up in the court system, have been adjudicated, raping someone and all this other stuff. So by virtue of all of that, for me, all the entrapments of the presidency, being a former president, kind of go away. I mean, as a former lieutenant governor, if I go out and I start criming like Trump has crimed, right? I'm not going to be able to rely on the fact that I was once an elected official. We have countless elected officials that have come before Donald Trump, from the U.S. Senate, governors, et cetera, who do not have the benefit of their former office to protect them. And everyone kind of bend over backwards for them in the judicial process because of their former position. That's how I look at this. You forfeit that, Mr. Trump, when you behave the way you behave while you were in office and while you were trying to obtain that office. So for me, this idea of being the president, being treated that way when it comes to what is the penalty for your crime, the 34 counts, is, okay, what would it be for anybody else? You get up to 4 years. All right, so it's 18 months plus community service. But there, for me, should not be a bar just because. I mean, you seem to think differently, and I understand the rationale.
In fact, I agree with you 100% on that. What I am worried about is I'm willing to put aside that for the fear of the danger that he will place, not he might, he will place America in if, in fact, that he is put into an institution, a jail or a prison. He will do it. There's no doubt in my mind. The same way that he did it while he was in office. The same when he was in Mar-a-Lago. And there's the recording of him trying to impress people by showing them secrets. We know for a fact that he gave away information on how many nuclear warheads are on a specific nuclear ship, one of our military vessels. I mean, think about how dangerous the information in that guy's head is, and he doesn't think. And we saw that from yesterday's press conference.
I guess it's something
The man
we're going to
doesn't
wrestle
think.
with between now and July 11th until the sentencing. I will just note that, one, I don't think we can operate out of fear, because if that was the case, people wouldn't have held him accountable. I mean, you wouldn't even took the stand. And then the United States has now joined the rest of many other democracies in the Western world, Italy, France, Israel, who have held current and former presidents accountable in the legal system for criming, as the chairman would say, that they did when they were the president.
I want to end not by talking about Donald Trump, by talking about Michael Cohen. I want to take you back to 2019 and something that the late Representative Elijah Cummings said to you in a House Oversight Committee hearing. Take a listen.
I know that this has been hard. I know that you face a lot. I know that you are worried about your family. But this is a part of your destiny. And hopefully, this portion of your destiny will lead to a better Michael Cohen, a better Donald Trump, a better United States of America, and a better world.
Do you feel you're a better Michael Cohen?
I'm a different Michael Cohen than I was. I'll tell you, those words hit me the same way now as it did back then. He's a special man. I'll tell you, a lot of people don't know this, but that night, he called me after, not to talk about the hearing, just to ask me if I was okay. And I said to him, one day I will be. I don't know how long it's going to take, but one day I will be. I'm not there yet. I'm far from okay. But hopefully his words come to fruition one day.
Well, you say you want peace, and you say you'll never get peace so long as Donald Trump is here.
Yeah, I don't believe I ever will.
Michael Cohen, as always, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Next, Lachlan Cartwright and Suzanne Craig are going to join the table.